Welcome to Create Passive Income Through Real Estate Investing, presented by our company Overland Capital. We're gonna, now that we've got going, we just want to say welcome and thanks everybody for joining. My name's Ken Holman, and I will be your host today. We also have Mike Holman, and I'm going to introduce him in just a few minutes. So a little bit about Overland Capital. It's part of the Overland Group family of companies, and we like to say that we're a vertically integrated real estate organization that's comprised of several independently owned and operated companies. We've been around for over 30 years now, so that makes us a fairly mature company, I think. The goal of our organization is basically to provide investors with a better investing experience. And we've all heard the phrase, invest in what you know. Well, at Overland, we really believe a big part of that philosophy is giving people the opportunity to learn more about, the most dynamic investing models that are out there today, and from our perspective, that's income producing commercial real estate. Just a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. And feel free to ask any questions throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer all of them at the end.
And, hey Ken, let me jump in here really quick and just say,
absolutely.
I think this is the most valuable part of these webinars that we do. So really do. I mean, if you have questions, whether it's related necessarily to the topic or not, we'd love to answer them. We end up answering a myriad of questions at the end of every single webinar, and that's really where a lot of the value comes in on these webinars.
Love is a strong word, but okay, we do like to answer the questions.
I love to answer the questions. Maybe Ken likes to answer the questions,
yeah,
but I love to answer them.
That's great. well, for those of you that that are signed on here, we're going to send a copy of this presentation out to each of you, so you'll get it after we're finished. May take a few hours to get it out, but we'll make sure that you get a copy of it. And you can also view it on our website at overlandcapitalcorp.com. You just click on the education tab there and it'll pop up. So as I mentioned, I'm Ken Holman. I'm president of Overland Group, and I guess you'd say with over 40 years of experience in this business, I'd obviously be considered the senior member of the group. Some think I'm maybe even beyond senior, but I consider me like the senior member. And I hold many of the top designations that you can get in the real estate business. That's been helpful to at least let people know that I'm really passionate about the business and interested in education and training and making sure that we're as well educated as we possibly can in this. But over the past several decades, I think we've acquired, developed, constructed, and managed, I think, close to $500 million in real estate assets. That includes apartments and self-storage, retail, industrial, office, even some hotels. So we've got a couple great projects we're working on right now. We've got over 85 million in real estate assets that are under development and construction right now, and we have another 100 million in the pipeline. So we're actively participating in what we're going to be teaching you today. So let me take a minute and turn it over to Mike to introduce himself, and he's really one of the driving forces in our company, and it's just a delight to have him here. And so, Mike, why don't you take a minute to tell us about yourself?
Thanks, Ken. I appreciate that. So, love being here. So, I run the investments and finance divisions of Overland Group. With that, I spend a significant amount of my time working with equity partners and lenders. I'm also a licensed CPA. Over the really the many years that we've been investing in real estate, we've come to find that the term passive income it tends to mean different things to different people. So we're gonna dive into that in just a moment. But generally, passive income is the money you earn through the passive investments you make. So these type of investments don't require a lot of work, if any, but still generate a return. Essentially, someone else is doing all the work while you're hopefully sitting back and reaping a portion of the benefits. So, as I mentioned earlier, passive income means different things to different people. And we're going to focus on three main ideas surrounding passive income. The first one is using passive income to create and achieve financial freedom. So, this is by and large the most common understanding of passive income, and rightfully so. It's the most fun to talk about and try to achieve. Second, while not nearly as exciting as understanding passive income to achieve financial freedom,
I think it's exciting.
you know, I'm the CPA of the group, and this next topic that I'm about to say is even boring to me. Is understanding passive income from the IRS's perspective. That being said, I believe that understanding it from their perspective is critical to being a successful and informed investor. And so you don't want to end up giving all of that hard earned, or in this case, hopefully not so hard earned money to Uncle Sam. And then lastly, we're a little biased, but us and a lot of other successful investors would agree, I think, that real estate is one of, if not the very best tool to create passive income and achieve financial freedom. It's really important to understand as we get into this active income versus passive income. So active income is income you earn, which requires a substantial amount of effort. And it's things like wages, or salary that you earn from your employer, or profits, and things that you're earning from the business that you own and operate. I mean, this eventually can turn into passive income, but as you're owning and operating it, passive income, on the other hand, requires very little effort, if any. It's things like interest you earn on your savings account or your certificate of deposit CDs or money market accounts. It's cash dividends you receive from stock investments. And then my personal favorite, real estate investment income. So this is not an all-inclusive list, but it gives you a good idea of the difference. So these five topics that I actually just talked about are really some of the main income streams smart investors tap into. And really the most successful investors have multiple of these income streams coming in. So the wages, like I said, the wages that you earn from your employer is an income stream. It's not passive. Neither is the income really that you receive from owning a business. Depending on how much you earn from these two income streams will usually determine, though, how much you have to invest in assets that generate passive income. So we don't want to downplay the importance of active income in this. I mean, active income is very important. And moving on to the next slide, you're going to see that usually early on in most people's careers or lives, most everything they're getting is from active income, right? But it's what you do with that active income, and it's turning that active income into passive income is the goal, right? Because as you do that, that's really where you're going to start achieving that financial freedom, right? You've probably read podcast or listened to podcasts. You've read books. I mean, if you're here, this is something that probably has piqued your interest. I mean, I can't tell you, I've probably listened to thousands of podcasts, read tens of books all on passive income. And the goal is kind of all the same, right? It's to achieve that financial freedom. So we're going to really spend most of our time now here on the passive income. And so first off is interest, right? This is definitely, usually I'll say, this is definitely the safest option of all the investment types. Obviously, there's different kinds of interest. If you're loaning on a mezzanine loan, that's going to be more risky. But I'm talking CDs. I'm talking about savings account, things like that. This investment option also provides the lowest return. Just the other day, I was browsing TD Ameritrade. I had a little bit of extra cash. I always like my cash to be moving, right? I want it to be creating something. And so I thought, I'll go on. I haven't looked at CDs in a while, but I'll just look at it. Maybe if it's a good enough return, it's somewhere I can park my money for a little bit. Well, I saw that the CDs on TD Ameritrade that they were offering were around 2% interest. And that 2% interest is only if you agreed to put up a CD that was 20 plus years. So I'm not saying you should or shouldn't look at this. I mean, everyone's situation is different, but 2% interest for a 20 plus year commitment, in my opinion, is awful. I mean,
I went to Wells Fargo the other day, and their interest rate wasn't quite that high, but they called it a super saver interest rate. And I told the guy, you guys ought to be embarrassed even calling it that.
There's nothing super about your interest rate at all.
That's
Oh, that's hilarious. So most people are at least somewhat familiar with the stock market, even if they've never actively done anything with the stock market. A significant number of people at least have, say like a 401k with their work. These can potentially be pretty good investments overall. And most professionals agree that annual returns on the market as a whole are somewhere between 6 to 8%. That being said, cash dividends are usually a small fraction of that, and stock appreciation is the majority of that number. But it's nice because these are very liquid assets. So last, but definitely not least, there's real estate. Real estate is by and large the most common investment vehicle associated with passive income. Why? Because real estate is known for throwing off significant amounts of cash. I mean, we're taking investments right now on a portfolio of discount retailers, which is generally considered one of the safest real estate investments out there. And just the cash on cash return is still between 6 and 7%. I mean, overall return, overall IRR is 12.3%. That crushes the CD savings market. And that also handily beats the stock market. Ken, let me turn it over to you. I believe you have the pleasure and the exciting opportunity of talking about passive income from the IRS perspective.
I couldn't be more thrilled, Mike. Frankly,
this is why we get to do these. So we get excited about things like passive income from an IRS perspective.
Yeah, well, and not only that, I was around back then when this all started. It began in 1986 as part of the 1986 Tax Reform Act during the Ronald Reagan years, and the rules of the real estate investing game really changed then because so many rich people were using real estate investing as a way to avoid like paying ordinary income taxes. Congress decided that they would change the rules of the game, and they redefined rental income as passive income. So they also defined that investing in real estate was considered to be a passive activity for most investors. And so here's how the rules worked before, and then I'll spend a minute and show you how they work today. So before 1986, during that Tax Reform Act, you could generate $100,000 in net cash flow, and with the ability to expense some of your capital improvements and your mortgage interest rate, and you even could take advantage of what's called double declining depreciation, which was a big deal back then. So it amped up your depreciation. And so you wind up being in a position where even though you were showing a net cash flow of $100,000 on your investment, you were actually writing or showing a net loss of, in this case, $220,000, which before could be written off against your ordinary income, and that was a really lucrative way for high income earners to invest in real estate. And they would do it. They weren't so much even concerned about the real estate they were investing in. They just wanted to be able to get the tax deduction. So after that 1986 Tax Reform Act, you could still achieve the same net cash flow, but the IRS changed the depreciation rules, making it more difficult to show high net loss on a property. And then they categorized all the net income or net losses as passive income or passive losses. And that made it so that passive losses could only be written off against passive income. They no longer let you write it off against ordinary income. So unless you're a real estate professional, which they have some different rules that they deal with, you could no longer write them off against the ordinary income. And if you're a real estate professional, you had to actively manage the property. Well, this became known as the passive activity loss rules, and there's a small special carve-out rule known as the phase-out rule, which permits an investor to write off some special allowances up to $25,000 in losses against ordinary income. But there are some very strict guidelines on that you have to follow. And this just, even with these changes in the law, it didn't change the dynamic of being able to receive net cash flow or passive income and have it entirely sheltered by the net losses that you generate. And but it did make it more critical that now you weren't just investing in the real estate for the losses you could achieve, but you really had to be smart about investing in solid real estate investments. And as a real estate professional, I was really pleased with the fact that the IRS came out with a new concept called cost segregation that helps us improve the amount of depreciation that you can get, but it allows a property owner basically to segregate the building components that comprise the real estate asset into different parts, and then over those parts, the project gets depreciated over shorter useful lives. So to give an example, the basic structure might be written off over 27 and a half years if it's apartments, or 39 years if it's other commercial property. But then you could segregate the roof and write that off over, say, 20 years. And the parking lot, you could write that off over maybe 15 years. And then other personal property that you have in the project over 5 to 7 years. So it's still possible to achieve a net loss on a property that's generating a positive cash flow or passive income. So even with these IRS regulations on passive activity regarding real estate, earning passive income is still, in my opinion, the ultimate goal to achieve financial freedom. Passive income in this sense, in my opinion, is not so much about net income as it is about net cash flow, which is a big deal. That's what you want to focus on. And in this sense, rental income from real estate is one of the best ways to achieve passive income, because it ultimately leads to that great goal of financial freedom. So now that I've talked about the most fun and exciting part of this whole presentation on IRS regulations, I'll concede, turn it back over to you, Mike, to talk a little bit about why real estate is such a great way to receive passive income.
Hey, you got it. And there's no worries. You need the boring stuff too. And I've been giving Ken a hard time about that, but I actually have, kind of something to add. In a previous life, as I kind of mentioned, I was a CPA. I worked at one of the big four accounting firms, and we spent, I was on the assurance side, but as a firm as a whole, we spent a lot of time trying to help companies receive positive cash flow while recognizing net losses. That that was the ultimate goal every single time that we had when we were working with one of these Fortune 500 companies. And so to think about taking that and being able to use that same strategy that big four firms are offering their Fortune 500 clients and spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on, I mean, you have access to that same strategy on a much smaller level. That's the beautiful thing about real estate is you don't have to have, a Fortune 500 company to receive the same tax strategies that some of these guys are trying to work on. So anyway, just a little side tangent. Thought I'd add my 2 cents on that.
I just wanted to, this is just a thought that I came up with, but that's kind of what differentiates real estate from other types of passive income. You talked about you can get cash dividends in the stock market. Well, when those come through, as a CPA, you'll know this better than I do, but don't those have to be recognized when you get paid a cash dividend as ordinary income?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the length of time you've had them out and different things like that.
But like with real estate, you're actually sheltering all the income, basically, because you're most likely showing a net loss on the property.
You're trying to.
Yeah, that's the goal. But so you're not having to recognize or pay a lot of taxes, but at the same time, you're getting a ton of cash coming in your pocket that's available to be used where you need it, right?
Exactly. You're exactly right. So moving on to kind of been getting into this, but I mean, there are really 3 main reasons why real estate is such a great way to receive passive income. And we're going to go over each of these in greater detail, but they are leverage, net cash flow versus net income or loss, which is kind of what we've been talking about and Ken's been talking about specifically. And then lastly, 1031 exchanges. Starting with leverage. Leverage is a huge benefit to real estate. And I'm going to give an example of why leverage is so powerful. So for everybody out there, I'm simplifying this for ease. So if you're a mathematician, cut me some slack here. We were running through this PowerPoint a few days ago, and Ken had to cut me off and say, no, your math's all wrong. And I said, it's not perfect, but I'm simplifying. So I will get as deep into these numbers as any one of you individually would like. You're more than welcome to email me, and I promise we can hash this out. So this is simplified numbers, but it proves the point I'm trying to make. If you had $100,000 and you invested in a stock, and let's say that stock earned you 6% annually, you'd end up with roughly $130,000 at the end of that 5 years. Okay, not bad. 6% return. You're in the range of that 6 to 8%. You're getting market return. Yeah, that's great. 30,000 in profit. That's fantastic. So now let's look at a real estate investment. Take that same $100,000, leverage that into a real estate asset that's worth $400,000. That means that we took out a $300,000 loan. Let's say for simplicity's sake, that loan has a 4% interest rate and is interest only. With that same $100,000, right, and you're getting the same 6% return, you now end up with roughly $160,000 at the end of 5 years. That's a 100% increase over the same time frame. That's doubling your money. And guess what? That doesn't even include 2 or 3 of the other benefits of investing in real estate, such as asset appreciation, tax benefits, or equity buildup. That's only taking into consideration leverage. I mean, just with the leverage, you've doubled your return on what you could get on a stock. Now, could you leverage a stock and try and do the same thing? Yeah, but there's some issues with that. I mean, trying to go get loans to invest in stocks is a lot harder. I mean, a lot harder than trying to go get a loan on real estate.
Mike, I tried to do that. I went to my bank and I said, okay, I've got all these great stocks. They've got good values, good companies. I want to use that as collateral to borrow some money from you that I could then go out and invest in real estate. And so what they did was they would only consider 50% of the value of the stocks, and they would lend on that. And then the interest rate that they wanted to charge me was more than I could make on the real estate investments that I wanted to invest in. It was like, this is a dumb idea. I don't think I'm going to be doing that. So
yeah, no, and so leverage is huge. And like I said, this example is super simplified, but it proves the point that I'm trying to make. Smart, intelligent leverage can fantastically improve your returns. All right, so moving on, Ken gave a great example of this earlier, so I'm not going to go into much detail here, but to recap, the cash flow you receive is sheltered by the interest expense and depreciation that you can deduct from that net operating income, or NOI. Although it's not quite as beneficial after the Tax Reform Act, real estate investing still provides, in my opinion, the very best opportunity to receive cash flow while minimizing taxes. So next, on to 1031 exchanges. When you sell the asset, the IRS permits you to invest in another real estate investment of equal or greater value through what's called a 1031 tax deferred exchange. And any of my seasoned real estate investors out there probably are really familiar with this. But if you're not familiar with this, listen up, because this is really important. So this 1031 tax deferred exchange allows you to continue compounding your dollars while deferring the tax consequences. So basically, you have a property, you sell it, there's a bunch of rules that you have to adhere to, but you move into another property, maybe it's a bigger property, and you do it tax-free. If you earned $100,000 on that last property and you move it to the next property, you've now deferred all those taxes. You haven't eliminated them, but you've deferred them down the road. And there's some huge benefits to that. I'll spare you from any more math here, but let me just say that I have seen some of our investors build a small fortune over the years through this technique. If this is something that I just piqued your interest, you're saying, give me more, go onto our website at overlandcapitalcorp.com. We did an entire webinar solely on 1031 exchanges. I mean, it's going to tell you more than you're ever going to want to know on 1031 exchanges. So if that's something that interested you, go there and find that webinar for sure. Lastly, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent here, so bear with me. One of the great things about real estate is the valuation of the real estate is based on the net operating income and cap rates. So while cap rates are usually driven by the market, you can actually increase the value of your asset by increasing the NOI. This is sometimes easier to do than at other times, but having that kind of control allows for huge cash flow potential, especially on the sale or exit of a real estate asset. I mean, you think of like a single family home, right? I mean, if you're invested in just a single family home, sometimes that can go up and down. As you get into bigger apartments, maybe you're into a 10-unit apartment. Well, if you can increase the net operating income, you just increase the value, right? It doesn't necessarily matter what else is happening around you. Like, yeah, those things are going to take into effect, but at the end of the day, people are going to be looking at the NOI and the cap rates. And if you've boosted your NOI and found ways to increase your NOI, well, you just increased the value. That is a control that you're never going to get in any other real estate or any other investing technique. I mean, could you imagine going to the bank and pulling out a CD and they do 2% and you go and you say, hey, if you guys would just do a little better and loan a little more and do a little bit higher interest rate, then maybe you could pay me a little more on my CD. I mean, it's crazy. When I say it like that, everyone thinks that, that's stupid. No one would ever think of doing that. Well, that's the kind of control that you have in a real estate investment that you're never going to have in most of these other kind of passive investment types. All right, Ken, I'm done with my tangent. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
I did that the other day. If you remember, you and I were in a meeting with a group of bankers, and we're all wearing masks, so it's a little uncomfortable to be in a bank with a mask, right? But they were talking about debt yield on a group of properties that we were doing, and how do we increase the debt yield for them as the lender? And I said, if you just lower your interest rate a little bit that you're charging us, your debt yield would go up. What do you think about that? And they all acknowledged that was the case, but I was only able to get them down about 5/100ths of a point wasn't able to move that needle too far.
I do remember that. It was a very simple solution. I don't know why they didn't like it.
Anyway, well, over the years, most high net worth individuals really have learned two fundamental truths when it comes to achieving a steady stream of passive income. And truth number one, if you have multiple streams of income, you'll eventually lead that will eventually lead to the financial freedom, which should be the goal of basically every investor out there. And then the second truth, one of the best streams of income is passive income you can generate by investing in income producing real estate. I not only feel like it's important to teach that in like a presentation like this, but I believe that in my own life and have done it for too many years to count. But I still am an advocate and believe that that is truly the best way to do this. So I thought I'd leave you with maybe 5 passive income tips at the end of this presentation, which might be a benefit to you. The first one, tip number 1, as Warren Buffett stated, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. So as an investor, when there's widespread fear in the market, it can serve up some really bargain purchases. And so we're in this COVID pandemic period and everybody's fearful about doing stuff. We have seen some significant movement on some pricing. And so we've been out there focused on putting projects or land under contract to purchase. And we've been getting some pretty good deals because everybody's a little uncertain as to what's happening. So sometimes the best time to invest is during an economic downturn, and look for buying opportunities when others are sitting on the sidelines. Tip number 2, one of the safest and most secure investments you can make is in real estate. We've said that more than once. I always like not to overuse Warren Buffett quotes because I try not to do that, but I did get a kick out of his golden rule. He says, rule number 1, never lose money. And rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. And I think real estate, more so than almost any other investment, really follows that philosophy. It's true that every investment, including real estate, has its cycles and it goes up and down. Real estate tends to have about an 18-year cycle from point to point, and which is a lot longer period of time than the stock market. But the fact is that real estate is a tangible asset, and over time it generally appreciates in value. This means that you're less likely to lose your initial investment, as Warren Buffett likes to talk about. But it really does a great job at preserving your primary investment and tends to generate higher yields on that than, say, stocks or bonds or other types of passive income investments.
Hey, one point I want to make on that, Ken, if that's okay.
Sure.
I mean, this is the prime example, right? Is like the Great Recession, for example, right? I mean, that came, that started, housing, falls through the floor, everyone's freaking out. Well, now you're sitting at it, and everything came back up, and a lot of people made fortunes.
They did.
On the real estate that they purchased through that time. I mean, it kind of goes with a couple of the other ones that you've mentioned. But I mean, the 2 points that I think it makes is the whole best time to invest during an economic downturn. I totally believe that that's true in a lot of regards. And then even with the tip number 2, everybody, I mean, I remember back in like 2000, right? 2009, all that whole era, there were people that legitimately thought that just real estate was basically never going to come back up. And you think about it now, you look back on it and you're like, that's completely irrational,
Yeah.
right? But real estate really has, I mean, it makes comebacks, right? It does have
Yeah.
its up and downs, but you hit it right on the head. It generally is going up, and it's going up, quite fast if you were to take a long-term look at it.
Exactly. And if you have a situation like that, where you own a property, you have to sit on it for a year or two longer than you anticipated. But because there's always this inflationary environment, values come back up, properties come back, and the income continues to move forward, and you're right back where you were, or even ahead of where you are, and there's great buying opportunities during that period. Well, tip number 3, you don't need a lot of money to be wealthy. Uh, that's probably contrary to what some people think on becoming a millionaire, but it really is true. You need leverage, you need compound interest, and you need time. And we found that if you use leverage prudently, you can achieve higher returns, but you also need to be careful about over leveraging. That can cause you some problems. So if you're careful, real estate can be a very secure investment. Even in these times, we're seeing returns in the range of 6 to 10%.
And those are just cash returns. I mean, those
Yeah,
aren't
exactly.
overall returns. Those are just cash.
Yeah, that's right. So, and then tip number 4, if you have a job where you're earning a good income, it's likely that you don't have the time to focus on finding your own real estate investments, because that takes a ton of time and effort. It requires you to, first of all, know real estate and be able to analyze markets and understand different property types. And then you got to develop relationships with owners and brokers and work with lenders and handle management issues. And there's many other responsibilities, but you can still generate great passive income and have a very successful experience if you're working with an experienced real estate syndicator. It might be the best way to go for you if you don't have a lot of time to do it on your own. You have to give up something, at least part of the return, to the syndicator, because he's taking a lot of the risk and doing a lot of the work. But if you're willing to do that, you can still find some great real estate deals. And working with a syndicator usually means you got somebody that's got a lot of experience and tenacity, and they know how to navigate the real estate investment world. Then the last tip, don't be an emotional investor. I see a lot of money lost because of people getting their emotions involved in the process. This is a numbers game. So be patient, realize that it takes time for a real estate investment to stabilize and season, and over time it'll produce the returns that you're expecting. Inflation is always your friend in the real estate business. Uh, most politicians really love inflation because it pays off current debt with smaller dollars. And what that means is over, say, 20 years, at a 3% inflation, the buying power of a dollar drops by 50%. So a dollar 20 years ago is only provides enough buying power to basically go 50 cents on the dollar. So real estate is one of the few investments that has the ability to continue to rise with inflation and keep pace with inflation over time. And so it's a great investment. So I hope those were tips worth listening to. But in summary, let me just say, to achieve financial freedom, focus on investing in income producing real estate. With the ability to leverage your investment and the opportunity to increase the value of your investment, and with the favorable tax treatment that real estate affords, it's absolutely, in my opinion, the best way to generate passive income. So that's it. We'd like to open it up for a little Q&A. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to take them. Mike, why don't you handle the
Yeah.
Q&A side?
Absolutely. And just before we get started on the Q&A, please make sure to take the poll that pops up on your screens. This just helps us to get to know you better. And like Ken said, we are going to go ahead and get started with the Q&A. All right, we're done. That was easy.
Perfect.
No, everybody, go ahead, put your questions on here. If you got them, we'd love to answer them. Like I said, this is a lot of times is the most valuable part.
Hey, the most valuable part of this whole thing, James says he really loves ABBA music. So good. James, you're a man of my own heart.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So I have a question for you, Ken.
Yeah.
What do you feel, in your opinion, right? And obviously you might be a little biased, but in your opinion, what do you feel are the best real estate assets to buy? Let's say you're a beginning investor. What would you look to invest in as far as real estate goes?
You know, I see a lot of beginning investors start on the home side of things. And they do that a lot because that's what they understand. And they may be a little less comfortable with commercial investments because they're a little bit more sophisticated. They have leases, they have other laws that they're working with, and they can wrap their head around buying a home or buying a duplex. But I've seen most of those investments. It's not a bad springboard to get into commercial investing, but if you can go from owning a rental home or renting a duplex or something, and you start moving up into the commercial world, you find your life gets a lot better because somebody else is managing the property for you, and they aren't taking a fortune to do it. And so I guess the two or three investments that I really like, and I like a lot, by the way, but we've seen just on the negative side, we've seen some types of retail that have been kind of eaten up by Amazon and some other companies. They've really struggled, and so have some, like the hotel industry. That was the darling of the business for years, but now this pandemic has really caused some issues there. I think there may be some real buying opportunities in hotels in the near future, and so I'm kind of keeping an eye on that. But then there are other retail investments like the dollar stores, for instance. Those have been great investments over not only the pandemic, but the Great Recession or Great Depression, all of that. Those were,
The Great
I
Depression.
know, yeah, the Great
Dollar
Recession.
stores
So
were great in the 1920s, everybody.
they didn't even know dollar stores then. So,
That's hilarious.
but
Dollar stores back then, that would have been like the Nordstrom, right? If everything was no, I'm just kidding.
yeah, that's
I'm
right.
just joking.
So Family Dollar, Dollar Tree, Dollar General, Big Lots. There's a bunch of them out there. AutoZone, O'Reilly Auto Parts, CVS, a bunch of them fit into that
Yeah.
category. But then those are pretty good investments. Generally have maybe a little higher cash return, but a little lower overall return. But they tend to be good, safe investments. Another one that I like apartments. I like self-storage because it acts a lot like apartments, except there are no toilets. So that's not a bad thing. And they tend to have a really steady appreciation in value because as the market goes up, you're able to consistently raise income. Whereas if you're on a long-term lease, it's more of a stepped up appreciation in value. But so those are some of the ones that I like a lot. Hope
Awesome.
I don't know if that answered your question, but hopefully.
No, I mean that's great. That's what I was going for. So we have a couple of questions. Paul has two questions. So first question, what is the best way to obtain leverage? And Paul, I'll go ahead and start this one. Ken, feel free to add anything afterwards.
Sure.
Uh, obtaining leverage is really based on two main factors. The first factor is the project, the deal, the actual real estate asset, right? What is it producing? Is it a development? Is it existing? So that's number one, is the actual real asset. How strong is the real asset? The second most important thing is how strong / experienced is the person or the group behind the real estate asset, right? Those are the two things day in, day out. If you have a poor project, it's going to be really hard. If you have no experience doing a real estate deal, it's also going to be really hard. And so definitely what I'd recommend if you're getting started, right? I think partnering, I think going with a syndicator, I doing something like that is a great way to start, because what ends up happening is as soon as you tie yourself to someone with experience, that's how you're going to get the experience. And so that's kind of what you need to do as you're getting started to obtain this leverage. I mean, you might have to bring on a partner who has done the real estate deal that you're trying to do, and they've done it a couple times successfully, right? And they can talk to the bank about that, and they can make the bank comfortable with the people behind the real estate deal, right? Maybe you're having a hard time finding the right real estate deals. You might need to partner with somebody who's out there finding real estate deals constantly. But those are really the two main factors that are going to go into obtaining leverage.
Yeah, let me add maybe another point to that, Mike. Leverage is all about adding debt to a project, and some people are really debt averse. If you have no debt, obviously, it makes it a really safe investment. On the other hand, if you put a prudent amount of debt on a property, it can, like you showed a little earlier, it can really enhance the returns that you can make. And the idea is generally banks they love to lend money on real estate, and they generally will lend money at a lower rate than you can actually achieve on the project if there were no debt on it. And so that's called positive leverage, and that's what we all try in the business try to get, is positive leverage on our investments.
Perfect. Hopefully that answers your question. Paul's second question: how do I go about finding a syndicator? Great question, Paul. Ken, do you want to start off with this one? And I have a few things to probably add at the end.
I'm sort of thinking if there's a way, Paul, I could send some money over the internet to you. That was a good tee up for our company.
Shameless plug here now.
Yeah,
you asked the right question, Paul.
We don't like to try and promote ourselves necessarily. There are a lot of good syndicators out there. You have to be careful that they're not too greedy. Some are and some aren't. But that's basically our model. Is we consider ourselves a pretty good syndicator. But yeah, that you'll find them out there because they want to be found.
Yeah, exactly. And a couple of the ways that you can do that, right? I mean, there's always the internet. I mean, you could just Google real estate syndication, and you're gonna find stuff. But a lot of the other ways, right? A lot of the podcasts, for example, that are out there, those guys, a lot of them are real estate syndicators, and the podcast is one of the ways that they're reaching other people. Things like these webinars, right? You're gonna see a lot of the people behind a lot of the real estate investing content are syndicators. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind, right? I mean, like I said, a lot of people who are writing books, a lot of people who are doing webinars, a lot of people who are doing podcasts. I mean, a majority of those people are syndicators. And the only thing that I'll say is just make sure you go with a good syndicator, because for every good syndicator out there, right, there's 10 bad ones.
Yeah.
And so
I think maybe we ought to do a webinar on that, Mike.
I think that's,
how to,
I actually think
how
that's a
to
good idea.
how to find a good syndicator. So
Yeah, no, I
because
think that's a great idea. So that's
you
the
can
thing.
sniff out the bad ones because they tend to be greedy. They tend to be difficult to work with. They maybe don't have a good reputation. Uh, the products that they're offering just don't maybe feel like good, solid investments. So,
That being said, there are, yeah,
but
and
there
that's
are some
exactly right.
good ones out
But there
there.
are some good ones. So it's really doing your due diligence.
Right?
I recommend emailing, calling them, trying to view for yourself. Make sure you're comfortable with them, right? And that you've asked the questions that you want answers to. Okay.
Maybe,
Well,
maybe in closing, Mike, let me make one last comment and then we can sign off.
absolutely.
Uh, I'm probably my own best example of a passive income investor. And over the years, I scratched and scraped and worked to get money to do real estate projects and try to generate income from them. And so it's been a learning process over the years. But it's kind of fun today to be able to sit back, and even though I'm still employed and I still earn an income, it's kind of fun to sit back and every month have the checks roll in on the real estate assets that I have an interest in and know that whether I'm healthy, whether I'm sick, whether I'm working, whether I'm not, uh, that money's still coming in every single month. It's kind of reassuring to know that at the end of the tunnel there is a big light, which is kind of awesome to be able to have. So
Awesome. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate that. Appreciate everyone who is on, especially those who participated and asked any questions. If you have any additional questions, wondering how to get a contact us, uh, the email there in the bottom left-hand corner is the very best way. So any questions you may have, feel free to email us. That's investors@overlandcorp.com. Once again, that's investors@overlandcorp.com. Or you can even call us, 801-355-1111. You'll get in contact with Kenzie, who's the one who answers the phone there. She can do a great job, direct you, get your question down, and make sure that we get that answered. So we love questions. We love talking with people. We love connecting. Feel free to reach out. And we can get something set up with either Ken or I, and really get you started on your real estate investing journey, get you started on your passive income, and go from there. Thanks, everyone.
all right, thanks.